Good afternoon, everybody. This is Scott Reed, your host for the Flock Talk the podcast. Today, we're joined by two former Ducks. We're joined, as always, with Drew Davis on one side, and joining us tonight, also Nick Cody. We're just going to talk all Huskies this week. It's Husky Hate Week. There's nothing else to talk about. We're just gonna jump right in. I'm gonna let both you guys. We'll start with Nick. Just kind of talk to me what this game meant to you when you played, and tell the fans kind of what this game means to you. And you may have a different angle at it because you grew up in the state of Washington, so there's a little bit different feel for I think this rivalry for you guys.
For me, Scott, it just means more. And it meant more back when the games didn't always mean that much. And I know, back in our day, we really preach and live by faceless opponents. But if there was one rival I always wanted to kick the ass of, it was UW, because growing up as a Washington kid, even though it was Southwest Washington, there were a lot of Husky fans during my recruitment process that couldn't believe I committed to the Ducks so early, before my senior season had even started. And I heard that hate that entire 2007 season from even my own head coach at my high school. Great guy. The only negative thing I could say about him is that he's a Husky. So he let me hear it every once in a while. But I think especially when I came into Oregon in 2008 and started my very career as a Duck against the Huskies in what was the only 0-12 season I remember in college football history. So I think I always got the last laugh, but I've always had to deal with it. It's always just meant a little bit extra because the bragging rights up here are different, especially now that I live above the North Seattle area here today.
And I was thinking about that 2007 season as well, because that season from a football perspective was probably the first time I think most Duck fans thought that a team actually had a legitimate shot at a national championship from Oregon. I know the 2001 team, they were number 2 in the nation. They got to the Fiesta Bowl and they stomped Colorado. But I don't know that too many people thought they could beat Miami that year. Some did, but 2007, the Dennis Dixon season, the what could have been a Heisman Trophy without the injury. And that's my go-to favorite for the post-2000 era season as far as the game against the Huskies, because we talked about it off air. The Stormtroopers, the 465 yards rushing, the 257 for Stewart. Most people may or may not remember Andre Crenshaw also had 100 yards that day, 113 yards. We had like 8.2 yards per carry. And Dennis Dixon went for 99 yards. It was just one of those really awesome performances that sticks in my mind. Plus the Stormtroopers. I'm not a big uniform guy, but man, that was such a cool look in that era for that team, I thought. Drew, talk to me. What's kind of your feeling on this rivalry? You probably have a different perspective of it.
Yeah, I definitely have a different perspective. Being from Colorado, I thought, Oregon State was the only matchup and the only rivalry in Oregon. But it's funny because I was being recruited by the Huskies, and when it came down between them and Oregon, it was just funny because each team would be like, "Hey, let me show you this chart on how much it rains up there or down there, and that's why you don't want to go to that school." So I felt really early on, I was like, "Hold on, I know it rains in both of these places. I'm coming to play football and get an education. I really don't care." But you could even just tell from recruiting, just the way they hated on each other in recruiting, that there was something special there or some hatred there. But when I went to Oregon and just lining up, and when I would hear people talk about it, they're like, "Yeah, we don't like them up there either." And I was like, "Hold on, we don't like them more than we like the guys down the street?" They were like, "It's about the same." And so you really had to look into some history of why it got that way and why it is. And I will honestly say I do not really like the color purple just from the Huskies.
I don't either. And I think most people that are really diehards know the story. I believe it was 1948. Oregon and Cal both finished undefeated in league play, but they didn't have an even number of games played. And Oregon lost a non-conference game. So they came down to a vote. And everybody expected the North schools to stick together and vote Oregon in. And Washington and Montana got together and flipped the vote so that Cal went to that Rose Bowl. And that is where the hatred really starts for Oregon fans. And it grew from there because during the lack of scholarship limit era, Washington was able to get a lot of extra players that Oregon couldn't get. And they were dominant for a long time for that reason. And, the 94 season, people forget that's also when the 85 scholarship limit had just started to take really effect in college football. And that's a big part of the growth of non blue blood schools, so to speak. So for me, this one for me goes back to, I went to Autzen Stadium I'll age myself a little bit in, 1978, 79. I was in junior high and watching those teams and watching, we're down at 50-yard line by halftime because nobody was there except for the Washington game. Even then, even when they weren't great, the Washington game would get a sellout, and you couldn't move from your little corner, and you could feel it, and I just felt different than the hatred for Oregon State. Oregon State was more. It didn't feel like that kind of hatred. There wasn't an animosity toward them for something, and at that time I didn't know the history, so that was just one of those things. This week, the game, Oregon 17-point favorites. I'm not sure how I feel about that. Oregon has not been great against the spread at home this year. I think 2-4 against the spread at home. It's just one of those things. Part of that is the two first games of the season where they didn't cover. But I look at it. Tell me what you guys think you see on tape from both teams.
I mean, especially up here, I literally just on the way home from the gym today wearing Duck stuff. Somebody, that recognized me when I was walking home and leaving, and there was just that, hey, good luck this weekend. Not like you're gonna need it. And from a Husky fan, you're hearing that after the last 2 seasons where they've just been talking and talking, and now, man, I'm like, no, don't do that. Don't do that right now. Ultimately, what I've seen this season, most the 2 games I really got to catch were them against UCLA and them earlier in the Apple Cup. And that Apple Cup game really showed me a lot of dysfunction that they may be able to correct if they really are going to start the freshman at quarterback. If you even think back to the end of that game, they're going speed option. They're in the red zone. And doing that with Rodgers versus the freshman, I think you got an opportunity of winning that game, but then you're putting it in a freshman's hands there at the last play of the game. So they're better than their record, I think, indicates. But again, this is a team that hasn't won on the road yet, and you're going into Autzen Stadium to finish your regular season. You got your bowl game eligibility out of the way. I mean, honestly, I've heard a lot of resigned Dogs fans that are just like, I'm not going. I've been trying to even talk some of them down, like, hey, can I get a ride? And no, we ain't even going this year. So there's a lot of that. And I'm hoping that the Huskies bring that attitude with their team with them and just get the smack beat out of them.
I'm here, Nick. I second it. Like you said, if they play the freshman, it'll be a really interesting game. He's a freshman, so I expect the defense to make him look like a freshman if he's out there. But they've been pretty steady running the ball on the ground. Jonah Coleman has 1,000 yards rushing, has 10 touchdowns. He's a large portion of their offense. But they kind of, if they get behind early, they're not able to run the ball like they want to. And I know they started the season pretty fast. And throughout the season, they've lost one, they won one, they had a short little 2-game skid here. And so they're really, really feel like they were kind of trying to figure out what their identity was. And now on defense, they have 20 sacks on the year, which equals to about almost 2 sacks a game for what they've been going for. And so they're kind of stout on defense up front, I would say, with Belichick over their coaching. And I always say this and I always bring it up. I know the Ducks are coming off a bye, Washington's coming off a bye. That extra prep time sometimes helps you see something that that the Ducks might struggle with in the first half, or the Ducks might be able to do something that they've seen from Washington that's a weakness that might help them pull away at the beginning. So both teams is pretty much have the same amount of time off leading up to this game. So it'll be just very interesting to see how they both come in and how they're playing.
When I looked at it, and I did a deep dive on both the offense and defense for Washington, and one of the things that I noticed was they remind me a lot of Wisconsin. Their defense is similar in what they do, right down to the fact that Wisconsin was great against the pass. And if you looked at their rush defense coming into the game against Oregon, when you take out their sacks, their rush defense was not great. And I did the same thing and we just call it sack adjusted yards. And I did the same thing with Washington. They're giving up, I believe, 165.6 yards per game on the ground, 4.9 yards per carry. So their rush defense is not great. Their pass defense was good for the first 8 games. The last 3 games, they're giving up about 260 yards a game. They've given up, what is it? Instead of the 5.1 yards per carry, 6.4 yards per attempt. Just it's been different the last 3 games. They just haven't been quite as good against better passing teams, and I think that's the difference when you look at a team. Did they rack up a lot of low yardage games against bad passing teams, or are they just a good pass defense? I think it's a combination of both. They're a good pass defense, but they also took advantage of the teams that they should have taken advantage of. And when you saw USC come in, and you saw, one of them was Penn State had 260 yards passing. They've given up some yards the last 3 games, so I think they're susceptible to that. Offensively, they're mediocre, and that's the best way you can put it. And maybe that changes with Demond Williams in there at quarterback because he's going to bring an extra dimension. But is he any better than Aiden Childs or some of the other, the quarterback that played for Purdue that was playing for the injured Hudson Card? Is he better than those guys right now? I'm not sure. We've only seen really one half of football from him other than plays here and there. Can he command an offense for an entire game and take control of the play calls of the line of scrimmage, the audibles, the changes in the protections? Is he going to be able to handle all of those different responsibilities? If they throw him out there on the road with that role, that's dangerous. It's a recipe for disaster against a really, really good Oregon defense who also gets after the quarterback, who also has an exceptional pass defense and a better than average run defense. So I think Oregon should be able to cover the spread, but it's still a rivalry game, and it's really tough to predict in rivalries what's going to happen when tempers flare, right? People get heated. Which brings me to the next thing. We're going to talk about injuries. Obviously, Dan Lanning's not going to tell us a single thing heading into this game. We don't know. He could make it sound like Dylan Gabriel is in a fight for his life to start because that's what he likes to do. We know that's not true, but he's already said you'll see when you see. My thought is I don't think Tez Johnson does much more than some plays. He needs to get his feet back under him. He needs to get his legs in there and get some plays. I don't think he returns punts this game. And I don't think he's the guy running every offensive play. What do you guys? We'll start. Drew, what do you think on Tez playing a lot this week?
I would agree with you. Like I said, they're coming off a bye week, so if he was at practice last week, that's a good chance to get his legs up under him. But I'll tell the people that the only way to get into football shape is to play football, and that a lot of that happens in the game on Saturday. And so I could see him having, 30 to 40 plays, maybe if that, and especially just not being in on the blocking plays or things like that. I could see them trying to get him a couple balls. But like we talked about, if the game is in hand early, it's more so like, hey, how you feeling? You're good. How's the shoulder? It's good. Okay, cool. It's going to be one of the things. Like you said, we're so deep in a lot of these positions that there's no rush to get him out there. That it's like, hey, make sure we're good to go next week for the Big Ten championship game rather than this game against the Huskies.
Yeah, I think I'm mostly in agreement, except I would throw him out there, not maybe as a blocker, but as a decoy for a couple plays. Just see how he's running, and if the play breaks down, having him there as an option. Always would like to see him get like as we used to call it back in the day, kind of that smoke screen off a read option. But if we just got him the ball for a couple touches, that's all you need to see, and just make sure you got him near the sideline so he can get out of bounds and play it safe. And I think really, again, that's the best way to make sure he could test the injury, check and make sure he's in football shape. And then hopefully if our defense does what it's supposed to do, I'm not as worried about that. I would love to see Marcus Harper back at right guard, because right now the rushing game would really, really love to have our most experienced blocker up there in the game.
And I think I agree with that. I think, it's one thing because Harper's injury was lower leg. They're going to put a brace on no matter what he does when he starts. And I think getting him some snaps is going to be really important. And that's a position where you really need that football shape, right? Because you're getting hit every single play. And that's not something you can emulate until you get out there on the field. You can't emulate all those little things that happen on first contact in a practice in a game. And I think that's important for him. Even if it's only, half the snaps, get out there, get your legs under you, get that feel for the blocking, get the feel for the cadence from the quarterback again, get the feel for what defense they're doing and how they're shifting, the speed that happens out there on a game versus in a practice. And I know people say we practice like we play, but it's difficult to sometimes get the speed up in practice like you have in the games. And I think Gary Bryant Jr. has been doing a good enough job at punt returns. I don't think you need to put Tez back there. Gary Bryant's back. Let him do that. Don't put that shoulder at risk on a weird hit because of something he turned to catch a fair catch or thinks he's going to run it. I think that would be a really good move. Um, and I agree. I think on Jordan Birch, and I think he'll play, but not as critical with Mateo's emergence this season. You can get away with another game without Jordan Birch, right? I think the one that I'm curious about, and you guys can jump in. I don't think Jaleel Florence is ready to play. He put out his tweet. I don't think he's ready to play. Maybe he gets a few snaps or something. I'm not sure. That injury was pretty difficult to come back from, and we're already in the 12th game of the year, and he hasn't played a snap yet.
Yeah. I mean, whenever you're putting someone out there, though, I mean, there's always the fan base reads into it. However, you might just be unintentionally putting it out there or just trying to drive some hype and not really realizing the speculation you're putting out there. But again, this team is so deep at all on the defense. I remember the way we used to rotate guys, they were all talented, but the level of talent that they have in the depth here, I can't believe it, in the secondary and the defensive front, especially. So, yeah, with Birch being out, I expect, out or not, we have the talent right there. And Jaleel coming back is just kind of like frosting on the cake. Hopefully he can get out there and get some reps, but you don't necessarily need it the way this defense has been playing.
Yeah, you don't need him. I think getting him some reps before the playoffs would be potentially valuable because that's just one more guy to go against if you're facing, I haven't looked too deep at some of the teams yet to see who's got elite receiving cores. Tennessee does. Georgia does. So getting an extra defensive back out there that can cover, that was probably the second best cover corner last year behind Kyrie Jackson, that's never going to hurt, but he needs some reps. He needs some practice time. We're not talking about a guy who's been out for 2 weeks. We're talking about somebody who's been out for a year and hasn't really played at game speed.
And I just adding on to that, I was just going to say that, like you said, it's been early in the season. The rotation's pretty much been set. Not saying that you can't break up the rotation, but it's not going to be within, the first or second quarter. But you just hope a guy like that, whenever they come back, that they're ready. And you just never even know what it's like to just be running around on the field pregame as well. That can bring something, that can do something for him. But like we said, there's no way to get ready to play except playing.
And I think back to Noah Whittington all season long. It's taken him some time to get really back to where he was before the injury. It's not, and he was 100% at the beginning of the season, but it's the little things. It's the cutting on that leg that was injured. It's the trust in what you're going to be able to do when you plant that leg and move forward or twist your hips to turn and to go into coverage. All those different things that you don't know what you don't know until you get out there and try it. And it takes there's a mental aspect to it. You guys probably know that better than me. The mental aspect of injury recovery is just as difficult and maybe more so than the physical recovery.
Yeah, because, well, especially, when you get any major injury in your career and you have to come back from it, you start realizing you're just adding eventually down the road. If you have a full recovery, you really have to add one more prehab, or that injury is going to come back and it's going to nag you in some kind of way. And that's always something I have to think about now that I'm only, working out 4 days a week, 3 days a week. And even then, sometimes I'm like, man, if I don't spend the time warming up the things I have injured in my career, especially with the joints and ankles and knees, it's going to hurt me later. And, you wish you realized that when you were younger, but every time you actually go through one of those injuries and you're able to sometimes you focus so much on it, you get stronger. And, especially if it's one of your limbs, you get stronger in the left leg or left arm, just focusing so much time on that rehab there, that just learning those things to build and sustain the things that you do to get out of that in your recovery and build that into your, basically your pre-workout and then your warm-up routines. And it just becomes a part of your life and being able to function and have the best use out of your body when you're older.
I second that. I came back from ACL injury my sophomore year, and I think it's hard for any player to come back from an injury. But when you're playing a skill position, and you have to go on those quick, fast twitch movements of, hey, I got to avoid this person, or I caught this ball and I got to do this. It takes a while for it to come back in its entirety. And especially, like you said, it's more the mental block too. You know what 100% feels like. You know what you used to be able to do before the injury. And there's some things you're like, well, I still feel, a little bit slow here. I still feel I'm not getting out of my break. And those things can get to you, and you kind of don't really know until your body is fully healed that you're like, hey, like I feel like I was exactly where I was before this injury, last year whenever it occurred. So sometimes it just takes time, but it's also those repetitive reps and being out there in the field and being able to do it.
I wish I knew now or then what I know now about injury and rehab. I tore up my ankle pretty bad in college and didn't think about it. And now, 30 years later, the what you'll just best call is arthritis because of, it wasn't operated on. So it was just one of those things where it lingers and lingers and lingers, and you don't think about ankle flexibility and ankle strength and I did a lot of powerlifting, never thought about ankle flexibility and ankle strength other than how it could help me lift more. And had I done some work with my ankle, maybe I wouldn't be in quite so much pain when I walk my dog in the field. But I think there's good points there that there's a lot to think about these days with the expanded playoffs and the extra games that you're going to have to go through. And, Dan Lanning talked about it before the season about the depth isn't just if somebody gets injured, it's to help avoid some of these injuries. If you have Dave Yulee and Matt Bedford early in the season, maybe Marcus Harper's not out there when he gets injured against Michigan. Maybe you've got a second guy out there and you've got fresher legs that are less likely to have an injury get rolled up on. Now that's the benefit of depth when it happens. You have some quality people behind there that can fill in. But I think they've done actually a pretty good job this year. If you look at the linebackers have done really good at rotations. I think the defensive linemen have done really good at rotations. Jordan Birch's original injury was a fluke during a walkthrough. So it's not like this was something that happened in a game or a contact injury. They've done a really good job for the most part. I think the one place where they didn't have a ton of quality depth that could step in right away was offensive line. That's why we saw the struggles early with Bedford out, with Yulee out, and the rotations they went through with Pickard at center and Lalaulu at guard and the flip flop, and then finally bringing in Struther. But it's that depth that helps avoid injuries. I think that has been a key, and it's going to be the key moving forward because now Oregon's coming off finally a bye week, a week to get those muscles healthy. And I talked about it in Flock Talk, I think last week. I talked about the the tissue damage that happens in our bodies, that it takes recovery time to get past that. There's sometimes you just need a week off. We did it in powerlifting. Everybody at any level does a week off where they gets that recovery time. And I think that is the part I'm interested to see is one, are they going to still be sharp? But two, how much did that week off really improve the physical and mental well-being of this team? They had to be drained emotionally and physically by the end of 8 weeks. I can't remember the last time I saw that kind of a stretch in conference play without a bye.
Yeah, and one of the things, in fact, is a lot of workouts, and even the workouts, a lot of the seasonal workouts Coach Radcliffe had us doing were really in 8 week increments and broken down sectionally into 4 weeks of just having to change things up because yeah, you get in that grind of the season. 8 weeks straight is crazy. So getting that extra time and just especially, you've always got a couple coaches during that bye week. They're out on the road hitting the recruiting pretty hard. So it's really a lot on like the it's on the team really themselves to spend a little more time, not just in the weight room and the film room, but they're getting treatment. That was always the biggest thing on those bye weeks is, man, that was the best time to finally, grab Chief or Kim or Travis and just be like, hey, I've had this thing. And if we could just get this figured out this week, I'll be able to make it through the rest of the season that much better. And everybody that doesn't take advantage of it will regret it later. And I know it took me a long time to figure that out. It's probably until my sophomore year where I realized, all right, I needed to really get in there and speak up and be like, this is what I need to get my body right. And, that's any program anywhere in the country. And I think there's a lot of people that don't have the luxuries, at least for these guys, especially to self-sustain like Oregon does right now. When you go into the HDC and the complex there and you're just like, all right, yeah, that with the treatment center we had, man, they've got everything they need.
So I'll assume you were talking about athletic trainers, Nick.
Yep, absolutely. Drew
That's
knows.
we treat them like they're our brothers and sisters, right? Because
Oh,
they get in there and they're wrapping our ankles, they're wrapping everything up and making us feel like mummies, but also making us feel like we can get through another practice, another game.
I'm
And
I'm
so
begging
we
I'm
know
begging
them.
them. I'm begging them, please make it hurt now. It'll hurt less later.
Yes, yes, get that ankle wrapped as tight as I can, please, because when I hit that cut, it's gonna hurt. So make sure it doesn't give,
Yeah.
especially when you got weak ankles like me.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Drew, do you know your trainer's name still?
Oh yeah, of course. Those are people you don't forget. They're the unsung heroes. They're the guys that are coming out when you're injured. They're the guys that are telling you what you need sometimes and asking you if you did X, Y, Z, A, B, C. And so love those guys. A lot of those people are still there. Kat, Trav, Chief, Kim, Heather,
Yep.
just to name a few. But yeah, I love those guys, and I actually saw them when they were out here playing UCLA. So those are my guys and gals.
I always thank
Nice,
them
nice.
every time. Got to thank them.
That's good, and that's true because it's those little things that I think people don't think about. All the little things that go into playing sports at the college level. It's not as easy as just hey. And I know people think, oh, you have easy classes, you have tutors. Okay, and we also, I got up at 5 a.m. and I walked to the school where I played, and got there at 5:30 and then did the morning routine. Then I had to go to school all day, and then I had to go to the training room and get taped up, and then I had to go to practice, and then it's 7:30 at night, and then you've got to decompress. I had a separate room I had to go to decompress and kind of get back into being a student mode, and then you got to go home and study. And it's midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, and you're going to bed and getting up and doing it all over again. I think people don't know how many hours outside of the practice itself that we put into this, and you guys played at a much higher level than me and put in even probably more film study than I had to put in. So it's just it can be a brutal schedule. It's very rewarding. I loved every minute of it, but it also can be a brutal schedule when you're going on 4 and 5 hours of sleep every night and trying to stay at peak performance, right?
Absolutely. It teaches you a lot. It compared to the people when I got, out of football and into working, just the advantages it gives you, especially, the old coach and things. If you're early, you're late. If you're on time, you're late. If you're early, you're on time. And then if you're late,
Yep.
you're out of here. That, like, I have worked with a lot of people professionally that just can't understand that, and they don't understand why, especially now in comedy. Everything I do in comedy, everybody's fine with going on late, and it's really, really difficult for me and someone that it just gets crazy about time management. I'm like, no, if we say 8, we're gonna start it right at 8. If we didn't already start it at 7:58, I get a little Coach Prime in that regard. But yeah, I've had to learn a lot of patience because people that haven't been in that competitive world of athletics usually can't really relate it, even if they are and bring great attributes into the business world and are competitive there. They really don't necessarily understand that just the regiment that a student athlete has been under.
I think the ability to push past things is very valuable, like you're saying, Nick, in the real world. The ability to push harder than other people have to push because you can't do college athletics without pushing your body to and your mind to the limits in a lot more ways than we think about, like we were talking about. And I think that carries over into life. Drew, you've done some life coaching, so you can kind of give a good testament to that.
Yeah, it's what we don't talk about a lot and what we don't talk about often is obstacles and adversity help you with what you're doing. They let you know, hey, do you really want to do this? Are you going to push through these things and overcome these things in order to get to your goal? And a lot of people do that. They find out like, yeah, this is pretty hard. I don't really want to do this as much as I said I wanted to. But then it also pulls you closer to people who have those same goals and aspirations that you do, like doing this show. Like you find somebody who is on time, who's consistent, who communicates, and those types of people come together and they're like, yo, I like working with this person because I can depend on them because I can count on them. And I think that's what not we all, but a lot of people at the end of the day, they want people that they can count on. They want people that they know, just like we talk about football and sports. I know if I'm a linebacker, I know this person is going to be in the hook flat, so I don't have to worry about that and do too many jobs. It goes from sports to life, and the more that you're prepared on both sides of that, you're gonna do a lot better than a lot of other people because you've been seasoned to be able to react like that.
Absolutely. So we'll turn back to the game. What do you guys got for predictions? We'll start with you, Drew.
Oh man, I struggle with this one. I don't think we're gonna cover, like you said, we've been struggling to cover at home, coming off of a bye week for both of us. I think they'll stick around longer than we expect them to, but like you said, I think we're just trying to get through this game with not a lot more injuries going into the Big Ten championship game. So I'm gonna say I think last week I was way off. Week before last I was way off. So we're gonna go ahead and go 34-20 Ducks.
Okay.
So I hope I don't contradict my official prediction I made earlier with my recording of the Once a Duck podcast. I can't remember if I said Ducks by 1,000,000 or Ducks by 1,000. I'm gonna have to check my numbers on that. No, and again, I'm the biggest homer in these picks in this game always. I said Ducks 31-0, and it's mostly what I want to see, which is weird because I feel like I've picked the Ducks to go over 40 in so many games this season, and now I've resigned to myself to the fact that I love seeing this team just play that clamp lockdown defense, and I will take a shutout over a bunch of points right now, especially in this rivalry, just to silence them. That would be the favorite thing to me. If we just put our foot down on whatever quarterback's throat is going to be out there metaphorically, and then just force them into the worst day of their lives, man, I would love to see just a big 0 up on the scoreboard for Washington. So my prediction 31-0.
I think I'm going to go, and I am going to actually think that they cover the spread, but only because I think there's going to be a pride touchdown by Oregon late. One of those where it's not Jordan James, it's not Noah Whittington. It's a guy like Jaden Lamar, who is from Washington, from the Seattle area, where it's 28-17 late, and somebody like that gets a touchdown. It's a pride touchdown, makes it 35-17, covers the 17-point spread. I kind of see this offense, if they come out like they came out against Purdue and Illinois, they can score on anybody. And I do think they're going to be that kind of refreshed. And I think they're going to be really good at and efficient. Will they score 50 like the 2007 team? No. Will they score over 30? I think so. And I don't know that they'll have to settle for field goals in this game. Washington is really good in red zone defense. I think they give up 54% touchdown rate on red zone opportunities. So they're going to have to work to get some of these scores. I don't think they're going to score every time down the field. I don't think it's going to be anything like that. But I do believe that Oregon should be able to move the ball and score some points on this team. And the Oregon defense is just too good for, I think, this Washington team to score a ton of points on. They're not good at scoring points anyway. And this will probably be the best defense they play all season. So that's what I've got. I've got 35-18. That I haven't written it down yet, but that's what I'm going to put in the article I do for our roundtable that we do. And then just parting thoughts, kind of tell favorite memory for watching the game for each of you guys.
Man, I got to tell you, is my junior year was the last game in Husky Stadium with that ugly ass track around the field. And my favorite part about that is especially knowing, tight end coach, special teams coach at the time, Coach Oz, and a lot of the old staff, they hated the Huskies. And especially under Chip, they would keep it kind of mum. But as soon as we won that game, man, we were letting them hear it. So I still remember as we're going off the field, and I'm shaking a couple of the Husky recruits' hands that are, didn't redshirt and had to play that 2008 year that are graduating. This is the last time I get to play against them. So I'm saying, congratulations to my Washington guys on their careers. And then as soon as we're headed back to the locker room, we're singing na 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 na, hey hey hey, goodbye. Even got Coach Oz singing it. So that's when I knew, like, oh, that's going to be a moment I remember forever. And in the back of my usual podcast background, I only have one set of wrist tape that I still have cut off and kept, and it's from that very day. Date written down, and remember, that's the day we closed Husky Stadium for about a year, but it was not long enough. They could still wish they'd shut that thing down, but yeah, just reminiscing back to that day. I remember that's back then. I don't remember anybody calling it the greatest setting in anything, and I blamed a lot of it on that bum ass track.
It was ugly. Was that the 2011 game?
Yep.
Yep. I remember that one because after the game, that's the one where Sarkisian walked up to Chip and said, "That defense is better than I thought they were." Because I think Wade Kalakipi had a really big game that game, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That
Yeah.
just overall, it felt like kind of handled them in that's the scenario. I remember especially the past 2 seasons going back. Husky Stadium's just a way different experience now. Ever since the only real advantage and intimidation factor they used to have was us just having to go out the same tunnel at the same time. Now that you got the teams on the other side, that's taken away, but the fans are that much closer, and it's a lot more intimidating place to play than it used to be.
Interesting. What you got, Drew?
Man, it's funny. I have a personal story, but when we played them my senior year at Oregon, and they weren't pretty good, but they played us pretty well. And I had a couple friends that played on their defense. And I remember I was talking to them after the game or leading up to the game too. And they're like, "Man, we haven't smoked or we haven't drank at all this week. We're ready for you guys." And I'm like, "Okay, you guys went cold turkey to play with us." But the thing I remember the most is we actually got booed at halftime coming off the field because the game was close. And I was over here like, geez, like they want us to be beating them by 40 or 50 points. And I think they were down by like 10 or we were up by 3 or something small. And we came out and we handled business in the second half and kind of ran away with it. But they played us tight for 3 quarters. That's about as much as they can do until we pulled away. But I think Cliff Harris had a long punt return, not for a touchdown. He got tackled at like the 10 or 15-yard line. And but they played us pretty tough, and you can tell that they really wanted to beat us. I don't know if we were ranked number one at that time, but we were pretty high. But you can tell that they would have made their whole year if they would have beat us.
Was that the year Keith Price started for them?
Yep.
And I think that was his first start, and people expected him to get overwhelmed, and he didn't. He actually had a pretty good game in that game. I remember that. So, yeah, I think for me, I it's not going to be my formal one that I put in the article for the roundtable, but to me, I think my favorite moment. So I had moved to South Carolina in 2017 for my day job, and I came back on vacation in 2018, and I timed it so that I could see 2 games at once. And one of those games happened to be Washington, and it happened to be C.J. Verdell busting through the middle for the touchdown. And that might be, at the time, it felt like the loudest I had ever heard an eruptive cheer at Autzen Stadium, where you weren't sure, nobody was really cheering because Oregon's on offense, and all of a sudden he busts through, and the entire crowd just exploded. I think the only time I've heard anything close to that since was Dylan Gabriel, his 27-yard touchdown run against Ohio State earlier this year. I heard the same thing. It was the same kind of thing. So that game really sticks out to me as kind of, it was a turning point for Oregon for multiple reasons. Kayvon Thibodeau was there, and that game made a difference in his belief that trajectory was there. But it also kind of said Oregon was going to be back to what they should have been after, the disastrous 2016, after Willie Taggart left after 1 year. I think that one to me will always resonate. Maybe because I was on vacation, I enjoyed it differently than I would have if I had been here the whole time working in the press box. But to me, that's my favorite memory. And I'm using post 2000 because you say all time, everybody goes to 94. So I wanted to skip and just say post 2000.
Well,
but you guys had a different experience. So
as someone that rushed the field at that game, that's always one that I'll cherish. But it doesn't compare to actually beating them yourselves. But that one's definitely my favorite experience as a fan of anything. That's for sure.
Absolutely. All right. I think that's all we have for tonight, guys. I do want to make a chance to let Nick promote his own podcast, the Once a Duck podcast. Go ahead and talk about that real quick, Nick.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, for anybody that doesn't know, I have a great podcast with my co-host Sam Schmidt, And, we release it every week. There's an Oregon game. And this week we've got Walter Thurman III, one of our teammates, on. He was a great interview this week. I hope you guys go check it out. We've got 5 seasons already in the tank. And so we're excited to wrap up however this season wraps up, and hope you guys stick with us and just appreciate it. You can follow us. All our social media handles are at Once a Duck. Very easy to find. Let us know. Subscribe on YouTube, and let us know in the comments what former Ducks you want to see. You can also check out our Drew Davis episode, which everybody likes, is a big favorite.
Don't lie to him, Nick. You don't have to lie to him, man.
No, it's a big favorite. I checked the views. It said you watched it like 100 times.
All right, I'm going to let you guys go. I appreciate your time tonight. We ran a little bit long, but it's hate week, so we got to go as long as we can to talk about how much we don't like the Huskies, right?
Dubs down, baby. Go Ducks.
All right, guys. Hey, Nick, you're going to be in town if you want to hop by our tailgate. I actually have a tailgate in the RV section of the Boy Scout lot, so we'll be there. We get there Friday night. We'll be there all day Saturday hanging out. I'm not sure what we're having, but we'll have beer. I know that. I don't know what we're having for
awesome.
food.
I'll bring my buddy and I, Jan, are coming down, so we'll definitely have to stop by and make the rounds on our way.
All right, shoot me a note and I will give you our location.
Sounds great. Thanks, man. Appreciate it, Scott. Good seeing you, Drew.
Care,
awesome,
fellas.
guys. You guys have a good night.
You as well. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. Oh,
Happy Thanksgiving.
This guy.
Always.